What's up, family? And welcome back here to another week on Guns and Butter with your favorite cousin, Kinda G. I haven't done that type of intro and it feels like so long. So, you know what that means, cousins? I'm back on my BS. Now, before we get started on this week's case, I know everybody has been seeing the police body cam footage of Sonia Massey's murder. Now, I'm not going to speak too much on it because it's really going to piss me off. But I really do hope and pray she gets justice. I hope her family gets all the answers they deserve. And I pray with all the body cam footage and all the evidence that the officer is held accountable and he gets a life sentence because that was murder. All right, now back to our regular scheduled program. So last week I took y'all through the death of NFL player Antonio Armstrong. Now this week I'm going to be taking you guys through the death of an NBA player. And it's really interesting that both deaths took 7 long years to get justice. Now, I chose to do this one this week because not only did it break my heart, but it really showed me just how persistent and selfish people are. So I'm not going to keep you guys waiting any longer. Get your popcorn, your wine, and let's jump right into it.
That's what it's all about. Guns and butter, baby.
Alright, cousins, so this week at the dinner table, I'm going to be telling y'all about the murder of Lorenzen Wright. Lorenzen Wright was born November 4th, 1975, in Oxford, Mississippi, to his parents Deborah Marin and father Herb Wright. He got his start playing basketball at Lafayette High School, where he played for 3 years. So after his junior year, he moved to Memphis, and he transferred to Booker T High School. And out in Memphis, he loved the city, and the city loved him right back. And at 6 feet 11 inches tall while only in high school, he was already a force to be reckoned with. And he was also already building a strong fan base within the city. But he liked the music scene, going to church, and good barbecue. And you know Memphis is nothing but good barbecue out there. So high school was a really exciting time for him. I mean, let's be real. He was a star of the basketball team, and his social life was popping. But one day he stumbles upon one of his coach's daughters named Shara Roberson. Now she was 5 years older than him and already in college, but they just started off as close friends. You know how it is. So after graduating from high school, he went on to play college ball at the University of Memphis. And while there, he was a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. Now by this time, he and Shara's friendship had blossomed into a relationship. And by his sophomore year in college, he was already playing on an All-American team. And it was said that people who didn't even like watching basketball would make it a point to watch Lorenzen because he was just that good. And after he started playing college ball, it didn't take him long to realize that he really had the talent to make it in the pros. So you know he tells his biggest fan, his mom, that he thinks he wants to go to the NBA. But of course, like a mom, she wants him to finish his degree. But he would always joke with his mom and say that $1 million salary playing in the NBA would be much better than any degree. Now, even though his parents were divorced, he was still very close with the both of them. His dad was actually paralyzed from the waist down after being shot in the back while on duty working for the Memphis Parks Department. And even with him being in a wheelchair, he wouldn't miss anything when it came to Lorenzen. He was his biggest supporter, especially when it came to his basketball career. And it wasn't long before Lorenzen became a father himself. Shara gave birth to his first son, Lorenzen Wright Jr., on April 11th, 1995, when Lorenzen was only a freshman in college. Now, he and Shara was busy, like busy. They went on to have 5 more kids. Now, having a big family was always really important to Lorenzen. He knew that he always wanted to have that same closeness and that same bond that he had with his parents, with his own children. However, the people in his life at the time thought that Shara was just trying to trap him with kids. She knew what she was doing though. She knew her man was going to make it big in the NBA, so having his kids would solidify her status in his life, and in turn, she would be able to be part of all his success and his money. Especially because in 1996, 2 years before they got married, he was drafted into the NBA, and now he was making bank. He was signed to the Los Angeles Clippers after being the 7th overall pick in the first round. Now, along with the Clippers, he went on to play center for the Atlanta Hawks, Memphis Grizzlies, Sacramento Kings, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. But the height of his career was when he was traded to the Memphis Grizzlies in 2001. He was at the pinnacle of his career. Being able to be back home in Memphis playing for his dream team, he was back in his city, he was back in his element. And everyone who played with him had nothing but good things to say about him. He was a good teammate, he was friendly, he was always in high spirits and extremely easygoing, just a go with the flow type of dude. And if you see any of his pictures, he always has a big Kool-Aid smile on his face. But he was also always known to be very generous and giving, even from a young age before he had money. He was always giving to other people. Definitely the type of person that would give you the shirt off his back. But once he started making them millions, them big bucks, no whammies in the NBA, this took his generosity to a whole new level. So you know he had to start off by buying his mama a house, because that's just what we do. When we make it big, that's just the first thing we do. And it was just a few miles down the road from where he stayed in Memphis. But he was always willing to help his friends out, and I just feel like he just couldn't say no. He would pay for dinners, vacations, getting them into games, and this man was even helping his friends pay their college tuition. This is getting taken advantage of. Like, they see they homeboy made it out the hood and now they trying to reap all the benefits of his success. I'm not paying your college tuition, friend. I just cannot do it. But he would even go as far as to let his friends stay in his home, which a lot of people described as being better than Disneyland. But he himself had no problem enjoying the finer things in life, especially when it came to flashy cars. Lorenzen loved cars, and Sharon loved jewelry. So even though the two of them, or he, had all these millions coming in, they were also going out just as fast. But throughout his NBA career, he played in over 800 games and 13 seasons. And during the course of his career, his family was growing. Like I said earlier, after Lorenzen Jr., he had 5 more kids. He had a daughter named Laura, twins, Lamar and Shamar, another daughter named Sophia, and then his last was a son named Lawson. Now, they also had another daughter named Sierra, who was born March 14th, 2002, but she sadly passed away due to SIDS when she was only 11 months old. And after she passed away, this just changed something in him. He was different, like he wasn't the same Lorenzen. And with the heartbreak of losing their daughter, it really took a toll on he and Cher's marriage. But he went on to create the Sierra Simone Wright Scholarship Fund in her honor. And by doing this, it inspired him to go back to school and finish his degree in the summer of 2003. And it was around this time when things were going really well for his career. However, you know the good times don't always last long, because in the 08 to 09 NBA season, he wasn't offered another contract. I mean, he was still an amazing player. He was a good player. But there was new competition coming in. LeBron was coming into the NBA, and after being there for 13 seasons straight, his performance just wasn't making the cut anymore. So not only was his NBA career coming to an end, but so was his marriage to Shara. Shara was the one who actually filed the papers, but Lorenzen agreed that their marriage was over. The two of them finalized their divorce in February of 2010. It seemed like losing their daughter Sierra was one of the things that led to the downfall of their marriage, and the fact that neither of them had been completely faithful to one another over the years. But Lorenzen did tell some of his friends and family that he felt like Shara was only with him for the money, especially towards the end of their marriage. You see, during their divorce proceedings, Lorenzen ended up signing a $1 million life insurance policy, stating that if something happened to him, all his money would go to his 6 kids. Lord Jesus, listen to this. He was also ordered to pay Shara $26,000 a month in child support and alimony. Damn! That's a lot of money. Now, being that he was a millionaire and he had made all this money throughout his career, that little chump change should have been nothing to him, right? I don't care, but that's still a lot of money. $26,000 a month? No, baby, I'll give you $5,000. Take it or leave it. But either way, he was still spending and giving a lot. And Cher wasn't a stranger to blowing money either. So it didn't take long before making these $26,000 a month payments became too much for him. So after the divorce, Lorenzen ended up moving to Atlanta. But he was always in between Memphis and Atlanta visiting the kids. And he and Cher's sexual relationship never really ended. You know, every time he came into town to visit the kids, he was dropping that thing off for Cher too. But during his transition out of the NBA, Money was getting tighter and tighter. All he was doing was spending. At this point, no money was coming in. And it was estimated that Lorenzen had made at least $55 million during his career. But it had gotten so bad at this point that the bank was about to repossess his condo in Atlanta. Now, he did have some minor plans to play NBA overseas so that he can start making money and still support his family. But the people closest to him recall him mentioning that he was feeling kind of lost at this time. I mean, as you could imagine, he had spent his whole life doing this one thing that he loved. And on top of that, he was going broke. So what's next? But either way, in 2010, at one point, he had plans to travel from Atlanta to Memphis. This time, his daughter was having a dance recital and he wanted to make sure that he was there. And Cher wanted him to be there as well. And not just that, his sister was having a baby shower, so he was going to make sure he was there on July 18th. So on this specific day, Lorenzen got dropped off at the Atlanta airport by a close friend. When he landed in Memphis, he first spent the day driving around town with one of his old homeboys. Now, his friend said they picked up one of his sons from basketball practice. He then dropped them off at Cher's around 10 p.m. You see, Cher had been blowing his phone up, pissed that he wasn't home yet. So when he got out the car, his homeboy says, he was like, oh, let me go deal with this mess. Lorenzen tells his homeboy he'll hit him up later, and that was the last time his friend seen or heard from him. Now, the next day was the baby shower, and he had plans to see all of his friends and family, and they were all expecting him to come, but he never showed up. And everybody who was there that day never suspected that he was in any type of danger. They just figured plans changed or something came up, but nothing extreme. You know, he was once an NBA player living that baller lifestyle, and they felt like it wasn't completely out of the norm for him to disappear, especially with everything that he'd been dealing with mentally lately. But his mom, Deborah, knew right away that something wasn't right. She knew he wasn't just going to miss his sister's baby shower and not tell anyone where he was. So she spent the whole day trying to get a hold of him. But when he didn't return any of her phone calls, she knew something was wrong. So on July 22nd, after having no contact with Lorenzen for about 3 days now, Deborah reported him missing. So while looking for Lorenzen, the first step the police wanted to take was speaking to all of his friends and family. And of course, the police also wanted to talk to Shara. You know, she's his ex-wife. She probably knows him best. She would know his hangout spots or, where he could possibly be. Not only that, but he was dropped off at her house the last time he was seen. So cousins, listen to the story she gives the police when they go to speak to her. So she explains Lorenzen showed up at her house the night of July 18th, and he had a burner phone with him. So according to her, he told whoever he was talking to on the phone that he was going to, quote, flip something. And then she claims that around 10:30 p.m., he left her house with $110,000 in cash and a box full of drugs. She ended up changing her story about the box of drugs later on, though. She ends up saying that she never said anything about a box of drugs and somebody made it up. But in regard to his disappearance, she told police that a few weeks prior to him leaving her house on July 18th, 3 men showed up to her house with guns looking for Lorenzen. Then she goes on to say that these 3 men threatened her. Now, she says she never reported this to police because she feared for her safety and for the safety of her kids. So based on what she was telling the police, they start to believe that maybe Lorenzen was involved in something illegal, something, a little sketchy. So the search for Lorenzen went on for 10 days, and his mom was not taking this lightly. But on July 28th, 2010, 10 days after he disappeared, his body was finally found.
Police in Memphis, Tennessee have found the body of former NBA player Lorenzen Wright. That's according to Wright's uncle, who tells the Associated Press that police broke the news to the athlete's father Wednesday afternoon. A police officer would not confirm that, but said a man's body had been found near a wooded area some 15 miles south of downtown Memphis. A local news helicopter showed investigators searching the area for evidence.
His body was found in a wooded area off Callis Cutoff Road. Now, when he was found, his body was not presentable. He was so badly decomposed that he was unrecognizable. I mean, imagine Memphis summer or just summer in general. The sun was just eating his corpse up. Now, when he was found, his body only weighed 57 pounds. Lorenzen had been shot 5 times, twice in the head, twice in the chest, and once in his forearm. After doing his autopsy report, it's reported that his skull had a 3.5 by 2.5 inch cavity missing from the center of his face, where his nose and frontal bones were missing. He had 4 skull fractures all over his head, and his 2 front lower teeth were missing. He also suffered multiple rib fractures and fractures to his right shoulder. Now, with how badly decomposed his body was, he was only able to be identified through dental records. Now, investigators felt like it was going to be really hard to uncover evidence in this case due to how badly decomposed his body was. So when they started their investigation into his murder, it turned out that he could have been found much sooner than 10 days. You see, Lorenzen had actually called the police on July 19th, right before he was murdered.
Georgetown 911, where's your emergency? Hello? 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 I have nothing but gunshots.
So it's not really easy to hear, but you can definitely hear him say, "God damn!" Shots ring out and then silence. Now listen to this, cousins. The dispatcher who answered the call was located in Germantown, Tennessee, which was just a few miles east of Memphis. Now, Germantown is also less than 10 miles from Kohlerville, which is the town that Lorenzen's family lived in, and it's also the town where his body was discovered. Now, this is important to know because the dispatcher who answered the call never reported it or never made note of it, even though she clearly heard a man's voice, gunshots, and then silence, so it was an unsafe situation. There was 11 gunshots on that police call. So the reasoning behind them not reporting this call was because the location of the call placed the caller outside of their jurisdiction. So if this call had been reported, it's likely that Lorenzen's body could have been found sooner than 10 days, and more evidence could have been collected. But at the crime scene, they were able to find 2 bullet casings from 2 different weapons, letting them know that there was more than one killer. But because the 911 call wasn't reported until July 27th, it wasn't until July 28th when they actually found his body. And by that point, all they had was a very badly decomposed body, and the allegations made by Shira that Lorenzen had been involved in some shady business, most likely illegal drug activity. So based off these allegations and his financial situation, it seemed like it was probably true that he had been involved in illegal activity. So one theory that police initially had was that Lorenzen's murder could possibly had something to do with his connection to a guy named Bobby Cole. Now, Bobby was known to have some connections with the Mexican cartel, and his relationship with Lorenzen was actually investigated previously by the DEA. Remember earlier when I told y'all Lorenzen loved nice cars? So if there was one thing he was really going to be spending his money on, it was definitely going to be on expensive luxury cars. So when his money started to run out, he did what any smart man would do when his back is against the wall. He started selling off his most prized possessions. And it turned out that this Bobby guy also had a thing for nice cars as well. So he ended up buying 2 cars from Lorenzen. And it was really just one big coincidence that both these cars were still registered in Lorenzen's name when they were found to be involved moving drugs. But when this DEA investigation took place, of course Lorenzen denied having any connection to the cartel or to have any knowledge of what was going on with the cars once they were sold to Bobby. Now, during this DEA investigation, they did ultimately conclude that Lorenzen didn't have anything to do with anything cartel. But being that Shira is now bringing it up as the circumstances that could have gotten him killed, they're starting to reconsider maybe he could have been involved in something illegal. But Lorenzen's family is like, hell no. He was just way too family oriented to never mention to anyone that he was involved with the cartel. Now, police also had another theory to investigate. You see, in early August of 2010, one of Shira's neighbors came forward saying that around the time Lorenzen disappeared, they noticed that she was with an unknown man in her backyard using the fire pit. Now, they believe this is an interesting tip because who in the hell would be using their fire pit in the middle of July in Memphis? So moving on this tip, investigators get a search warrant. And on August 10th, they search her home and that fire pit. But they don't end up finding anything more than some burnt metal, which turned out to be nothing more than some paper clips and other office supplies. So without any solid leads, time just continued to pass. And the more time that passed, the more suspicious people became of Shara. So about 10 months after Lorenzen was murdered, that $1 million life insurance policy that he signed for was finally awarded to his children. Now, y'all can't see me, but I had heavy air quotes around his children. Now, none of his kids were old enough to receive this money, so we all know where this money went. It went straight to Shara's bank account. And instead of being a smart, responsible businesswoman and mother, and actually setting the money to the side for her kids or investing it in their future, she blew through almost all that shit in 10 months. Her little high yellow ass went and bought a new house, new furniture, new cars, and a whole bunch of unnecessary shit that she claimed was for a better life for her children. I mean, yeah, girl, spend that money. Who else wouldn't want their kids to be in a safer environment? Yeah, go ahead. Spend $1 million in 10 months and have nothing but material things to show for it. But Lorenzen's daddy Herb was not going for that. So on behalf of his grandkids, yeah, he sued Shara. So ultimately, the resolution the judge came up with for this situation was to set up a trust for the kids with the remaining money and from other assets. However, Shara was still the trustee on this account. But she was supposed to keep the court up to date on how she was using the money, and she didn't do that. Because y'all already know she was not going for having to have her spending habits monitored. So she ended up petitioning the court. Not only that, but she was asking for more money. So in this petition, she claims that she was owed that money because Lorenzen had fallen behind on his alimony payments. But the judge ended up denying her petition. Girl, get out of here. And by this point, as far as the investigation into his murder went, things started to go cold. So in 2011, they put a reward up for more information. The reward was set for $21,000, but with that, they only received a measly 48 tips. And only half of them were even worth investigating, so time just continued to pass. But his family and friends, as well as the public, still felt like Shara was somehow involved. But the police really couldn't do anything because there was no evidence. Now, all of this seemed to change in 2015 because Shara ended up releasing a book called Mr. Tell Me Everything. And now get this. The book was about the life of a woman who was married to an unfaithful and abusive NBA player. I feel like at this point, she's just playing in people's faces. Not that you released a book. Girl, you need to get your ass on somewhere. I guess since she spent everybody's damn money, she thought she was interesting enough to release a book. So at first, she claimed the book was a fictional story. But the details in this book were really offensive. And eventually she just started to tell people that the main character in the book was based on Lorenzen. So as you can imagine, this book stirred up a lot of controversy. So after her book was released, she ended up taking an interview with Sports Illustrated. And after everybody seen this interview, eyebrows were raised and they just had a sour taste in their mouth about her involvement in Lorenzen's murder. And on top of that, the type of person that she was. So the interviewer asked her straight up, "Did you have anything to do with Lorenzen's murder?" And this was her response.
Did you have any part in Lorenzen's murder?
At first, I'm a wife, then I'm a mother, and then thirdly, I'm an author. The law enforcement should do what's best to find out who's the killer.
And you understand, obviously, why I had to ask that.
I do, but I'm a wife, a mother, and an author. I let people do what they're good at doing, and I'm just going to do what I'm good at doing. They need to spend time and focus and find out what happened to him. We all need to know.
Bitch, I asked you if you had something to do with the murder, not your social security number and what you did for a living. The answer is yes or no. And when asked about her financial situation after the divorce, Shara responds by saying, quote, "I was married to an NBA basketball player for 13 years. My watch is a car. My ring is a house. I have 12 house notes in my ears right now. I'm just saying," end quote. Again, not answering the question, but let's just move on. In 2015, Shara met a man by the name of Calvin Cohens. He was a journalist interested in writing a story about her. So while doing the story, he ends up falling for her. They get married and move to Houston. Now, they didn't last long before divorcing. She eventually moved back to Tennessee with her family, became a minister, and married another man who was a music producer. So it seemed like she was moving on with her life. And it was so frustrating because all his friends and family felt like she was a lying ass. So Lorenzen's case went cold all the way from his murder in 2010 up until November 9th of 2017, when FBI divers uncovered a weapon in a lake in Mississippi. So this weapon was able to be recovered because the police ended up having a conversation with a man by the name of Jimmy Martin. Now, Jimmy was already in jail facing charges for murdering his girlfriend. Oh, and did I mention that he's also Shara's cousin? So while he's locked up, I guess he's feeling like, hey, he ain't got nothing else to lose. So he decides to talk to the police in regard to Lorenzen's murder. So according to him, the murder was committed by Shara and a man named Billy Ray Turner. So he claims he knew this because Shara not only asked him for help, but she brought him back to the crime scene after the murder to help him clean up. He said that he was with Billy when he dumped the murder weapon in the lake. He also told police that the night Lorenzen was killed wasn't the first time they attempted to murder him. You see, Jimmy and Billy had tried to kill him before, but it was unsuccessful. But the time Billy was successful, he wasn't with Jimmy, he was with Shara. Aw, shit. Now we starting to get somewhere. Come on now, tell us what's up, Jimmy. So Billy Ray Turner was actually Shara's landscaper. He was also a deacon at her church as well. Now, whether they were having a romantic relationship or not, we don't care about none of that right now. All we know right now is that Billy was definitely tied to the murder based on Jimmy's word. And the fact that the murder weapon was exactly where Jimmy said it would be, he's credible, so they're believing what he's saying. And not so surprisingly enough, this woman didn't show any signs of emotion when she was told the murder weapon was found. She didn't seem happy or relieved that maybe this would lead to solving Lorenzen's murder. Instead, she seemed more worried and guilty. And not long after the gun was found in the lake, on December 5th, 2017, this Billy guy was arrested and indicted for 3 different criminal charges. And 10 days after his arrest, Shara's gold-digging ass was arrested in California. So after Billy Ray Turner's arraignment, everybody was pretty much just waiting for the trial to start. And obviously Jimmy's testimony was something that everybody was waiting to hear because it was a big part of the trial. Now, Jimmy was given immunity for his participation in the trial, but of course he still faced charges for the murder of his girlfriend. Now, in regard to Shara, to everybody's surprise, on July 25th, 2019, she took a plea deal. She pled guilty to the facilitation of first-degree murder, which of course meant that she was never going to have to face a jury. Now, with this plea deal, it took the possibility of a life sentence off the table. So she was only sentenced to 30 funky-ass years in the Tennessee Department of Corrections. And she'll be eligible for parole after serving 8 to 9 years. And she would be given credit for the 2 years she had already served after being arrested in December of 2017. And on May 11, 2022, she appeared before the Tennessee Board of Parole asking for early release after serving only 15% of her sentence. Girl, try again. She said that she was sorry for what happened to her ex-husband and that she didn't want to see anybody hurt. Miss Lady, take your ass back to your cell. But 2 out of 6 of her kids actually came forward to speak in her favor for the early release. And of course, Lorenzen's family came forward to speak against it. And a couple weeks later, Shara's request was denied. Good. So her next parole hearing won't take place until May of 2027. And I hope that gets denied too. But if she does end up serving out her full sentence, she'll be 75 when she's released. So Billy, on the other hand, didn't take a plea. Instead, he pled not guilty to the charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and attempted first-degree murder. So his trial took place in March of 2022. And to kick off the trial, the prosecuting attorney Paul Hagerman needed to establish motive as to why Shara and Billy wanted Lorenzen dead. I mean, of course it was for money. But you see, when Lorenzen's body was found, he was still wearing all of his expensive jewelry. But he explains they didn't want that jewelry. That was pocket change to them. What they really wanted was his $1 million life insurance policy. So during the trial, of course, they're able to hear from some pretty important puzzle pieces to the case, including one of Cher's neighbors named Claudia. She tells the jury that while hanging out with Cher one day at her house, she witnessed Cher tell Billy that Lorenzen had a hit out on her, and it was pretty much him or her. Now, this testimony is important because it's showing just how badly Cher has Billy wrapped around her finger. Now, the real reason why everybody was sitting on the edge of their seats during this trial was because they were anticipating the testimony of Jimmy Martin. So Jimmy starts off by telling the jury what happened in the spring of 2010. So during this particular time period, Cher reached out to him because she wanted to come up with a scheme to kill Lorenzen. Now, he says he told her that wasn't the type of business he wanted to get involved in, but all at the same time, he was involved in damn near every aspect of the planning. So he says after she initially brought it up, he, Billy, and Cher ended up having a follow-up conversation about it later on. So during these conversations, he said they talked about the type of tools and equipment they would need to get the job done. And then he says, even though he was involved in the planning stages, he didn't actually think the plan would work. But in June of 2010, Jimmy was driving to his hometown of Batesville, Mississippi, and he said this is when Cher called him and told him to look in his trunk when he got home. When he got home and checked the trunk of his car, he seen that Cher had put 3 guns, some weed, and cash in his trunk. Then she called him back and told him to head to Atlanta where Lorenzen would be and to go through with the shooting. So if you didn't already know it by now, this is pretty much establishing that she's the ringleader behind all of this. Duh. So he tells the jury what the plan was supposed to be when he got to Atlanta. So this brilliant plan that Cher came up with was to basically just catch Lorenzen while he was slipping and take care of him. But he tells the jury that he never actually went to Atlanta. Instead, he lied to Cher and told her that he did go, but Lorenzen wasn't home. But she was pissed, and she knew he was lying. And on top of that, she had already given him money, weed, and guns. So she like, oh, hell no. I'm getting my money's worth. And she came up with another plan. Now, her second attempt now included Billy. She told Jimmy that she had recently gone to Lorenzen's condo in Atlanta, and she left a window unlocked. Now, she tells him that they should be able to go in and out of this window and get the job done. And at this point, she was really starting to piss me off, because there's no way you're that determined to kill somebody for $1 million. And that person being the father of your 6 children. And it still blows my mind that this is a real story. These are facts. And there are people really out here like Cher, dead set, determined on taking somebody's life just for money. All Lorenzen was worth to her was $1 million. That's it. So the reason why this second attempt was unsuccessful was because when they snuck into the house, they found somebody sleeping on the couch. And after Cher found this out, she really took matters into her own hands. So after the second attempt, she was tired of playing. She was running out of money, and she needed this job done. So Jimmy then tells the jury all the specific details about what Cher told him when she took him and Billy back to the field. So the night started off by, of course, Lorenzen getting dropped off at her house. She says she was able to lure him to the field by telling him she was going to pick up some money from her dad. But when they pulled up to the field, Billy was there waiting on him. And Lorenzen figured out quickly what was going on. So of course, he doesn't have a weapon on him. He doesn't know what's going on. So his first instinct is to just run. She told him that he jumped through a barbed wire fence, but they caught him when he fell and then they just started shooting at him. He goes on to describe how Cher told him he looked like a deer trying to jump through the fences when they were shooting at him. Like, she has no heart. He was probably so scared. But according to Jimmy, they apparently lost one of the guns at the scene. So the day they took him back to the field to help clean up evidence, they told him to bring a metal detector. So he says when they called him to bring the metal detector, this is also when they told him that they had went through with the plan and Lorenzen was dead. But they lost one of the guns. So he says when he went back with them, part of the crime scene cleanup was to cut out the part of the barbed wire fence that they had jumped through. Of course, just in case there was evidence on it. He says basically Cher was explaining to him that since they jumped through the fence, they didn't want to leave any evidence behind. So after that initial crime scene cleanup, Jimmy left and he wasn't contacted for several days. He says when he was contacted again, it was for the purpose of helping Billy get rid of the guns. Now, to this day, it is unclear what actually happened to the other weapon that was supposedly lost. But Jimmy does go on to say that him and Billy drove to the lake, scratched off the serial number, and then threw it in the water. And based off of Jimmy's testimony, it was definitely determined that he was credible. They were able to recover the murder weapon after 7 long years. And they were able to finally prove that Sheriff was behind Lorenzen's murder. Now, we'll never know why they didn't do more investigating into Sheriff as a suspect, but I'm glad they finally got the proof they needed. So after almost a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 3 hours, and it was determined that Billy was guilty. Duh! And he was found guilty of all 3 charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and attempted first-degree murder. And he was sentenced to life in prison. It still really blows my mind what people do to get money. Like, instead of just going out and getting a job, or instead of hustling and doing things the right way, you took the father of your children. You took a son. You took a brother. Like, this man was loved. And you did that for $1 million that you blew in 10 months? All right, cousins, obviously y'all can tell why I did this case this week. But anywho, I hope you all enjoyed this week's case. And as usual, I'll see you back here next week, same place, same time.